welcome everybody to this edition of Probation Matters, which is a podcast by PBNI, which tells the stories of the work that probation does and the impact that we can make in terms of changing lives for safer communities. So absolutely delighted today to be joined by Kirsten McFarland, who's just been appointed as PBNI's Trauma and Resilience Implementation Coordinator, and Marian Molloy from the Safeguarding Board, who is the Trauma Informed Practice Implementation Manager. So welcome to both of you today.
Thank you.
Delighted to have you. So maybe just to provide a bit of context and background, could you maybe, Kirsten, tell us a little bit about what does it mean to be a trauma-informed organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really important question, and I think it's really important that we all really think about what this means for us as we move towards that journey in probation to be trauma-informed. I think why that is so important is we run the risk sometimes of this, when we're hearing so much about the word trauma-informed, of it becoming a bit of a buzzword and maybe even a wee bit of fatigue about it's all well and good that we say this term, but what does it actually mean? And what does that look like for us in practice as an organisation? For me, in that kind of summary, I suppose there's lots of different ways that we could kind of explain that. But the real basis of it for me is about how we can work in an environment, how people can access our services and those we support, that is a supportive, safe environment, that we're looking at how we can build resilience and how we can actually just all enjoy being in work and look after each other in work. And that for me is in essence what we're trying to achieve here. But it is really about us having that realisation about the widespread impact of trauma, and recognising what those signs and symptoms of trauma are, and knowing that that's then for us to kind of try to respond in the best way possible to that. We all have different experiences through life, and it's about being sensitive to how that might show up for people day to day, whether that's when we're supporting service users, whether that's when we engage with others and their partner external agencies, or whether that's just ourselves day and day with our colleagues and work as well. So it applies across the whole board.
And it's not a soft way of dealing with things. It's actually a difficult and hard way to approach.
Absolutely. I think it's maybe a bit of a misconception about being trauma-informed, that it is a soft approach. In fact, the way I look at it is we're actually really asking people to show that recognition and turn towards what is going on for people here, and how does this show up. And in that way, it can be difficult, and actually and sometimes can be more challenging. And I think it takes a lot of bravery for us to put that recognition on and try to respond in the best way to make sure that we are looking after ourselves and others, but also providing a more effective service for everybody.
And Marian, Safeguarding Board have been leaders in this field, and they've been really supportive of organisations like Probation. So from your perspective, could you maybe just tell us a bit about Safeguarding Board for Northern Ireland's perspective on what a trauma-informed organisation is, what that looks like, and what it feels like?
Very much so, Gail. I think that for me and for the team that I work in, the trauma-informed practice team in the Safeguarding Board, our focus is that a trauma-informed organisation recognises the importance of relationships and connectedness, and that is at the heart of everything, and it's that idea that, as Kirsten said as well, it's not a one-off, and it's not necessarily about what we do, and it's not even about how we do it, it's about who we are. Who we are as the organisation and who we are as the individuals who make up the organisation, and how we embody the principles of a trauma-informed approach. And I think if you focus on that and focus on how we know that trauma is relational, trauma happens within relationships and trauma can be healed within relationships, but that it is about the people, but it's also then about all the things that impact the people, like the policies, like the environment, like the language that we use. It's about all of it. So it's very much that broad spectrum approach in terms of, as Kirsten said, realising the prevalence of it, which has been heightened for us now that we have Colin Walsh's and his colleagues' study that came out earlier this year, the prevalence of it for our own society and the things that have impacted our own society as well, and our own unique history. So having that information now is, really highlights just how we really need to think about that, the way that it impacts the people that work here and the people that you serve, and making sure that the organisation embodies the principles, really.
And those two areas, relationships and connectedness, are just so important to probation. And, even in terms of the service users we're working with, who so many of them present with addictions, and so many of them are present with mental health issues, and they don't have that connectivity, they don't have that ability to have other relationships in life. It's just that really sums up to me those two words, what we're trying to do with a trauma-informed approach. It's really, really important. Thanks for that, Marian. That's really useful. Just in terms of, Kirsten, the workplace, why is it important that we'll have this in the workplace in probation? Why we are taking this approach in terms of culture and estates and that feeling of staff being valued across the organisation? Why is it important?
Yeah, I think it's so important, isn't it, really? I think, for me, there's kind of two sides to that coin. We do work with service users who we know from, just as Marian said there, about our prevalence studies around how much adversity, and when we compare the offending population against the general population, there are higher stats there of individuals who have experienced trauma. And it also is about us not just thinking about one population, but our understanding that trauma isn't isolated to one population. This can affect anyone. When we come into work, we're coming with our own experiences, and it's really difficult just to walk into our place of work and leave all our life experiences at the door. Maybe it's impossible to do that, and that's why it is so relevant for all of us, for us in terms of how we deliver our service, but also how we relate to each other, and showing that compassion and understanding that we might not know what others have experienced when we're working with each other. And that's why, as I say, it is so relevant for the workplace, and it's important for us to really try to start to think about what those principles of being in trauma-informed are, and really not looking at them as a checklist or something that we need to do as an additional to our workload. It will take time, and that does take effort to consciously do, but this is something that we just want to automatically think about in any aspect of our work, whether you're front-facing or you're making those decisions that impact others in the organisation, or if you're just having an interaction with a colleague. These are all things that are so relevant for us to be thinking about.
Yeah. So with that in mind, Marian, Probation is an organisation that has frontline social workers and others working on a face-to-face basis with service users, but also a range of staff in other areas like IT and communications and HR. Is that approach just for frontline staff and practitioners, or is it something that needs to be embedded right throughout the organisation and is relevant to every role?
Yeah, no, it's certainly relevant to every role, Gail. And I think that, again, is another misconception, isn't it? That people think this is just frontline staff, or people, even when they hear the word trauma, they think, oh, it's counsellors, it's therapists, but it's for everybody. So as we know, and as we said, if in terms of our own unique history, people being impacted by it, that can be anybody that works in this organisation, whether it's somebody that's greeting you at the front door or your CEO, and having to think about how they're showing up every day with what they carry. And, everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own journey. And as I said, we have our own story and journey having grown up here. People who come to live here maybe have sought refuge here, are coming with their own stories. So it's for everybody. And in terms of the workplace, when we think about the policymakers, and when we think of people that are making decisions about money, when we think about all of that, for them to have an understanding of what's important and why they need to filter some of these principles into the policies, into the procedures, into the protocols, why it's important to review things, evaluate things, how to engage with people. And that idea that words matter. And, it's Karen Treisman, I think, says that, every intervention can be, or every interaction can be an intervention. You don't have to be a therapist. And that's for everybody. Yeah. That's not just the people that, for yourselves, that are maybe dealing with the people who are working with you that are on probation, but it's for everybody in your organisation. And, for people to understand that and also there's recognition, I think, to recognise the roles that other people play. I think sometimes when, people think, oh, it's only for them, and they maybe feel, well, they're not thinking about how this impacts me, or they're not thinking about when I type up this report or I read the details that are in this of somebody's history and trouble and abuse or whatever, how that's impacted me. So it's most definitely for everybody.
And at that policy level that you talked about, we're as an organisation looking at our strategic vision for the next 3 years, and Safeguarding Board have been really helpful in terms of helping probation look at the corporate plan, for example, through a trauma lens. We're going forward into a new corporate planning period. What should we be looking at in terms of trauma and at that corporate strategic level? Have you advice for the organisation to look at things in that trauma lens?
I think your best starting point is always the 6 principles. And I think if you look at how they show up, if we're thinking about safety and trustworthiness and empowerment and inclusion and collaboration, even, the use of those words in your corporate plan, but also then thinking in terms of the actions. Well, what are we actually going to do, and how will we notice it, and what will other people notice? How will they notice safety? How will they notice inclusion? How will they notice collaboration? How do we demonstrate that in a very real and authentic way? And I think if you look to see that the principles are infused throughout that, but also then are very clear about how you're going to evidence it and demonstrate it, then I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. Kirsten, we've set up the trauma group within the organisation. How important has that been in terms of just providing a bit of a strategic driver as well to you and to others in this world?
Yeah, really, really important. So that's our Trauma and Resilience Implementation Group, or TRIG as we are called to other people. And it really has been so critical in terms of us, one, even thinking about our trauma informed organ assessments, about where we really are in terms of that journey of becoming trauma informed and what we need to do to work towards more progress towards that goal. And that the TRIG have been so pinnacle in looking at pulling together an implementation plan and making that really practical in terms of how we can start to think about being trauma informed at every level of the organisation. I think that for me is so core. It's about how we infuse this, so it's part of our fabric, so it is part of our culture, but it's also interwoven through, like Marian said, our policies and procedures, as well as how we interact with others. And TRIG have been really critical to that and continue to be. And I think it's that having that dedication of staff in the organisation to help support that message and to help share that with other colleagues is vital. Yeah.
And you've taken on the post fairly recently in terms of that coordination piece. Why did you want to do that? And what brought you into that area of work?
So I've been in post for 2 months now, and I mean, trauma and trauma informed approaches has always been something I've been interested in through my career, and in my previous role as forensic psychologist in the psychology department at probation. And I think I just really believe in its messaging. I believe in the importance and the difference that this can make, not just for our organisation, but when we're thinking about our partner agencies and actually Northern Ireland as a whole, working together towards this vision. And that's when we think about being trauma informed, it's a systems wide approach, just as it is organisational wide as well. So for me, really what that's kind of the overarching thing of what drives me towards it. But I think for me initially, it's that key message of trying to understand that shift from looking at what's wrong with you to what's happened to you. And that really was critical for me in terms of having that more front-facing role initially. And I think that helped. We're always trying as part of probation to understand how someone has come to be where they are, what's maybe led or contributed towards their offending. And I think when we look at trauma through that lens with our increased understanding of trauma, that it really helps us to look at a person and understand their life experiences rather than just looking at a behaviour and seeing that as problematic. We're trying to unpick that a bit. And that doesn't just apply to service users, that does apply across the board when we're interacting with each other as colleagues as well. The other part of what drove me towards this role in terms of implementing trauma-informed approaches is just that recognition of how this can really support us just to be in a better place of work. And ultimately, we can label trauma-informed in what terms make sense for us. As I said at the start, for me there does run the risk sometimes of feeling a bit fatigued with that word. I mean, I'm already mindful of how many times I've mentioned that word. But it's about us looking at what's the core essence of that. And for me, it's us coming into work, feeling supported, feeling valued, respected, and to be a part of that work feels really rewarding for me.
And Brigitte mentioned at the Trig group during the week, she talked about it just means it's a better place to work in as well, in a really practical sense. That language around it's just a nicer place to come into if we're adopting this approach.
Absolutely. I will shout out Brigitte again because I think she just fosters and really understands what this means for us as an organisation and captures it in that real kind of terms. And you're right, it's just as simple as that. And that is that line. But it's simple, but it's going to take a commitment from every single person in the organisation across different grades.
And Marian, probation is ultimately a service delivered by people for people. We are very relationship based, and we talk about having relationship based practice and trying to deliver that very individualized approach. So again, for you've had your own journey working operationally and then coming into Safeguarding Board. What brought you into Safeguarding Board, and how does Safeguarding Board provide that support to organisations like us that are delivering on the ground to people in communities throughout Northern Ireland?
Well, I suppose my own journey probably started with my mother, I would say, who was full of compassion and of giving people the benefit of the doubt and always trying to look beyond what you would see. Very much so. So I think that was ingrained in me from I was quite young. I'm a speech and language therapist by profession, so and a big part of that was spent in Sure Start, 15 years actually. So again, working in the area where you notice the impact of social inequalities, social injustice and how that can impact people. And I suppose there's that idea of, when we think about trauma and people think of it as a one-off event, and maybe an accident or abuse or a catastrophic event, but it can be cumulative as well for people, people, whether it's poverty or not feeling seen, not feeling safe. So I suppose it started there, and then I did some, training around trauma-informed approaches when I was in Sure Start, and then I also work as a registered intermediary for the Department of Justice in a private capacity. So that's assessing the communication skills of vulnerable witnesses and victims and defendants for giving evidence. So that I started to see how trauma can really impact people. And then I also, as a speech and language therapist, moved into working with people in justice settings. So when you're dealing with people like you do yourselves, who, I remember somebody once saying to me, you're dealing with the people in society who need the most love, but ask for it in the most unconventional ways.
Absolutely.
And you start to really try and see the people, and as you say, not the behaviour, not the actions. And it's not about excusing it. It's not about excusing it at all. It's about trying to understand it, because if you seek to understand it, then you have a better chance of changing it. And for yourselves as well, that's very much it. So when the opportunity came up, I suppose, to do this secondment with the Safeguarding Board and the Trauma Informed Practice team, I jumped at it. I was ready for a change, and I thought, this is the natural next step for me, because everything in my career, I feel, has been bringing me to this. And to work in an organisation that has the privilege of working with so many other organisations that are doing some brilliant work, and to be able to support people, you know, to signpost them, to provide them with tools, point them in research, coordinate things, bring people together. I think the thing that I like most about it is, again, that idea of connectedness and relationship building between organisations, that cross-sector bit, where you can really get to see where organisations can support each other. And sometimes we can be central to that in terms of bringing people together. So I feel that's a real privilege in my role in the team that I work in.
Yeah. And Kirsten, when Marian's talked there about understanding behaviour, not excusing it, I mean, that's absolutely, I suppose, sometimes a misconception about our work, that we're excusing or supporting offenders, when what we're trying to do is challenge behaviours and understand it in order to move them away from criminality. Are there other misconceptions out there that are myths around the trauma-informed approach that you think are important to try and burst around, you know, what the work looks like and what we're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think that is a really big one, and I think Marian summed that up really well in terms of us understanding that behaviour and understanding it so we can seek to address it and support people and reduce more harm being done to others. Yeah. I think there can be some myths as well around maybe how we apply it within our own workforce. So, you know, a common thing I would hear is about, one, maybe this being an add-on to work, but also about this being, is this going to stand in our way of having difficult conversations? Are people going to use, well, I didn't feel that wasn't trauma-informed for me, and start to maybe use that as a way that makes us fearful of having those conversations. And that's not what we're saying when we're trying to apply trauma-informed approaches and think about these principles. In fact, what we're trying to do here is still have those conversations, not to shy away from repairing that, but doing that in a way that is safe, that takes on that recognition that a person might have had a similar experience and been really affected about it in the past, with that idea of supporting and making that person feel safe. So I think it's about us trying to just do more harm to a person, rather than us saying that we have to sugarcoat decisions or that we can't challenge because of this. It's not that. It's about how and the way we're saying things. With the myth, I feel that sometimes this can feel like a bit of an add-on to workload. I completely understand why it feels that way and why there might be a bit of skepticism around that. But I also think this is a mindset. You know, this is something that we want to automatically be thinking about through any kind of decision or part of our practice. And it's thinking about how we can interweave that into every area, so it becomes part and parcel with our day-to-day work, so it's not an add-on. But we have to be fair to say that does take time, and that will potentially feel like a bit of a burden for people at the beginning. But that is what we're here to do, is to support people, to help them see that, to make that feel less of a burden, and to understand that change takes time. That applying the trauma-informed principles is going to look a wee bit different depending on what grade of staff you are in, and that's going to take time as well to think about, you know, well, what does this mean for the task that I do daily? And it's okay to say, actually, that didn't work and I need to adjust that and I did maybe try something different. And as I say, that's what we're here to try to support with that journey.
And as an organisation that's committed to continual learning and enhancing our practice, this can make practice better effectively. This can improve our practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's more and more research coming out to show us what the tangible benefits of adopting trauma-informed approaches are and can be for an organisation. We can see those positives in terms of actually increasing the effectiveness of the service that we deliver, but also to increase staff wellbeing, to look at how we actually increase our retention of staff, decrease staff sickness, but also when we're thinking about how we engage with service users too. Do you know, we've kind of mentioned a couple of times now about this is about us looking at not just at the behaviour, but really understanding what's happening beneath that. And that can really help work to build more positive working relationships. And it can also help to make our work more effective because we understand more what's going on for that person to help them get them to access the right support that they need as well. The last thing I would say there is just about how it can inform our risk reduction interventions overall.
And Marian, if you had advice for a staff member who's sitting out in our team in North Belfast or in Mid Ulster today, and they want to really, buy into this and implement this trauma-informed approach in their practice, what advice would you have for them? What do they need to be doing?
Well, first of all, I would say that a lot of people are already doing a lot of good stuff and a lot of people are trauma-informed by nature in terms of the way they engage and interact. And I suppose, as Kirsten said, it's not the add-on, but it's sometimes just about being intentional with it and recognising that what it is. So there's that to start off with, but also I suppose there are lots of good resources out there. We have our own trauma-informed organisational toolkit that's available on the Safeguarding Board website under the trauma-informed approach drop-down. And it looks at 10 focus areas, from leadership to workforce well-being, to lived experience and involvement. There are 10 different focus areas. But if you wanted to have a bit of a dive into it, you could read that and it would help you as well, maybe have an understanding of what it means for organisations and realising that it is across the board as well, but I think as well it's just being mindful of yourself and how you show up, and being mindful of taking care of yourself, being mindful of your organisation's responsibility to take care of you, and then just, for me, a trauma-informed approach or trauma-informed practice is good human practice. It's about humanity. It's about being good humans. And if we can show up and keep that in our minds that, I'm going to be a good human today, and think about that in anything that we do, whether it's, as I say, in the finance department, whether you're sitting at the front desk greeting people, whether or not you're in the communications department, wherever it is, keeping that in mind and thinking about that. How would I like to be treated? And then thinking it's about everybody doing their bit, everybody doing it a bit better, and everybody doing it together.
That's really powerful, Marian. Thank you for that.
Because I think it is an excellent point about it is also focusing on what we do well, and we might not just be putting that label to it. It's actually, that was a really trauma-informed conversation I had there. I feel that did work well. So I think you're so right. It's about building on that strength of what we do well as well.
And I think you've hit a really good point there, Kirsten. One of the things I'd say to people is call it out, but name it, and just say, I felt really safe when you took me into that room to have that conversation, or, I felt really included when you recognised that wasn't going to be easy for me, or, in terms of I'm thinking about the labels of the six principles, whenever you did that, you really empowered that person, so that you're calling it out, you're naming it, you're using the language of the trauma-informed approach, but you're also recognising it, There's an American author, Bell Hooks, and she was about feminism and different things like that. But first of all, she talks about healing is an act of communion, so we do it together. But the other thing she talks about is about different aspects of love. But one of the aspects of love is recognition. People need to feel seen, and I think if we are doing that ourselves and we're demonstrating that and we're modelling it, that's really powerful, because that will start to seep out and it'll be infectious, and that'll be really good.
We had a conversation at Trig this week around that piece about being seen, that you might need to have difficult conversations as a line manager, as an area manager, but listening and letting people speak their piece and just feeling heard and seen is so important.
Absolutely.
And I think we're on a journey to doing that within the organisation. You've mentioned lots of resources that are out there, Marian, on the Safeguarding Board website, and I think we have some resources as well on the website and intranet, Kirsten.
Yeah, on our intranet page, we have a landing page for trauma-informed approaches, and that's really to have that kind of shared understanding about what we're hoping to achieve, but also what that really means. Along with some of the definitions of what the key principles are, as well as resources to help staff start to think about, well, how does this actually apply to my role? Yeah. So maybe some kind of key questions to think about, how would I apply the principle of safety in my practice? What might that look like if I am not a front-facing or if I am front-facing staff? So it's just to get staff start to think about, well, how could this work for me and what might work best? It's by no means exhaustive in any way. I know from advice from Trauma Informed Oregon, I think they said they have several pages of definitions for what trauma means. So this is very individualised and it can mean different things for different people. I think that's okay. You know, I think it's about us. The more we can feel that this is relevant for us and that we can apply our own meaning to it, the more we're going to be able to feel that we can adopt it. So I think it makes sense for us to do that bit of reading and to really start to apply it to ourselves and work.
And if any of the teams that are out there want to know more about this, or maybe want somebody to attend a team meeting, members of the trade group, there's 14, 15 members of the trade group, and people come into that group and they might go out of that group. But there is a resource there that people can go out and talk a little bit more in teams about this, and just provide a bit more information if that's needed.
100%, and that this is an ongoing conversation that's going to happen. It's going to take years. You know, we always talk about becoming trauma informed as a journey, and it really is that. It's about us being realistic about the time that this type of change takes. And being okay with that as well. I mean, my post is 12 months. That's not to say 12 months comes and then we're all saying, right, we're trauma informed now. And it is through that conversations with each other, and that's going to have the most power. So, of course, and that we are looking at ways that we can communicate this information out more to staff. Because the more that we're having the conversation, the more comfortable we are going to start to feel with it as well. And we're looking at different ways that that's going to work most effectively, but always come speak to any of us if there's more queries or questions that we have. I would also say about the trig, the membership is always open, and you said there about it being, some people feel that they've contributed what they need to and step back and back in. That is absolutely what we want to happen. We want people to feel that that's a space where they can contribute without it feeling like an extra addition to already very busy caseloads and work and other work pressures. So just contact to say if you are interested, and we'd very much appreciate any advice and support that people can offer.
And if anybody is listening to this today and they maybe feel a little unsafe or a little concerned, and some of the work that we are all dealing with is difficult work and complex work, there are resources there as well for people who are maybe feeling that they need a little bit more personal support through line management and HR and other initiatives that we have. So I take it you would encourage people, if they need a bit of help and support, and this maybe, has brought to the fore some feelings or, thinking that they've had, the support is there.
Absolutely. And it is something, we were having that conversation before, Marian, about how easy it can be for us to overlook the impact of our work. And again, that doesn't just apply to frontline staff. Of course, that means that too. But it also applies to working in a really fast-paced environment, working with really complex service users and needs, of different people. But also just the high demand of our job, things we might be reading, conversations we might be having, conversations we might be overhearing in the office as well. So it is really important that we start to recognise how our work impacts us personally, and trying our best to reach out for support when we need that, and that being completely acceptable and encouraged thing to do. And we do obviously have our services like Lena, I think, Inspire to support with that, and having those conversations with managers when it's appropriate.
Yeah, and it's perfectly all right to have those conversations
it needs
and reach
to happen,
out. Absolutely. Okay. And maybe just finally, Marian, I'll maybe just end with you. Are you optimistic and hopeful for the future of delivering trauma-informed approaches in organisations like probation?
Yes, I am. I am hopeful. I think, well, first of all, the Programme for Government has, committed to having a trauma-informed public sector. Yeah. And so that in itself is a massive thing, in terms of looking at going forward and where it moves. And we don't know what our team will look like in the next couple of years, but we're definitely very hopeful, given that commitment from the executive, that there is an understanding of the importance of it, and therefore there will be things in place to support organisations and that. I mean, obviously we're always looking at organisations also, this sustainability of it, and how organisations can take that on board themselves and infuse it and all of that. But I'm certainly very hopeful, and I think there is a real energy about it. I think and we've talked about that idea of it, being tokenistic or a buzzword or whatever, but I think at the minute, I think people are genuine in their interest in wanting to do this. And, again, that idea of being intentional with it, and I think there are real opportunities for organisations to work together, to learn from each other. There are lots of opportunities for cross-sector learning and support, and we know in a time of where resources are tight and things like that, I think there are real opportunities for people to come together, and support each other. And we're certainly looking at the development of, well, first of all, one of the things we're looking at the development of a trauma-informed leadership programme at the minute, and that will be piloted soon within this financial year. And we're also looking at the development of a peer support network, and we will get that established then with a view to, again, organisations being able to run with that nearly and support each other themselves as well, and keep that going, because people are telling us that that's what they need, that's what they want. People who are further down the journey can support people who are at the beginning, and as Kirsten said, it's a journey, but it's a journey with no destination, because it'll be forever evolving, and we'll always want to do better, and we'll always want to learn, and we'll always want that bit of continuous improvement and reflection and service evaluation. So, but no, I am hopeful, and I believe in people.
That's a brilliant way to end, and that has been a really interesting conversation. There's lots to unpack from that, and this is a conversation that we're going to sustain and keep happening over the next 12 months. So this is the first of a number of podcasts that really sets the scene. And if people do want more information, there's information on PBNI's intranet pages, on the website, and on the Safeguarding Board. So Marian and Kirsten, I want to thank you both very much for the conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
And we'll continue on this journey towards a trauma-informed approach in probation. Thanks.
Thank you.